G'day everyone. In this video today I'd like to talk about radios. Now when you first get your Heng Long or your Taigen tank, you'll get one of these factory supplied things. Okay. Now eventually if you want to move on to this hobby, you're going to have to replace these. Even the 2.4 offerings from Heng Long and Taigen, quite simply, I mean really they are, well, I'm not going to use the word toys, but they're toys. So you're going to want to get a proper, if you're getting into the hobby, you will need to get yourself a proper hobby grade radio. So say for example you have one of those old, the old Heng Long RX-18 and this style radio. Okay, you can make your first move up simply by getting, you know, say a unit like this, the RC2HL, which will allow you to use any of these radios to control your RX-18. So for a lot of people, and it brings to me my first talking point about radios, is of course cost. Everyone has a budget, so your radio choice will depend a lot on your budget, how much you're prepared to spend. Okay. Can be a bit of an outlay. That's why, like say, as I said, you know, if you want to slowly make your way up, you can still use your RX-18. You don't need to go out and buy, you know, a L-mod or anything like that to start using these radios. You can start off with one of these and like an RC converter board. Right. So back now on cost. Radios, depending on the brand and name, of course, the cost goes up. Another thing I've found too with radios is depending on your level of confidence with a soldering iron, or your level of expertise, your level of experience, you can actually get a good radio for a cheap price. Before we get on to that, we'll talk about some of these cheap radios. Okay, here we've got a couple of cheapish radios here. You'll find on the cheap radios very little functionality. Okay, you've got your basic things you might have. So this one only comes to 6 channels. You've got some simple controls across the front there and just 2 switches. No real way to change the way the radio operates. So you've got that style radio. Here's just another one of the same, you know, there. Okay, this one will have a potentiometer. So we'll get more about switches well shortly as well. So you've got, you know, your cheap radios like that, basic functions. So if you don't want to do anything too spectacular, you could go for those. Probably not really in the cheap range, but as far as function goes, like you can go up to your Spectrum, say. Now this is DX5E. You pay a lot for it because it's Spectrum. It's a good radio, but again, you're very limited in the number of switches it has and your ability to tell it what to do. So, apart from the cost, before I move away from cost, and then we have the good old 9X radio, or the 9XR. Now this is what I mean when talking about your experience and cost. You can pick up a 9X quite cheap, you know, 60, probably still now, still only $60 US or so. And it's a great radio. It's got lots of switches, which we'll get onto later. But the thing is, you need to change the firmware. And if you're handy with a soldering iron, it'll cost you about 10 cents in parts to simply get inside here, add some electronics and flash to a different firmware, and you've got a really excellent radio coming in for, you know, under $70. Okay, certainly a flashed up 9X, probably, without ruffling too many feathers, is going to be better than your Spectrum as far as being able to program it and run tank things. Okay, the next important thing when you're looking at your radio are these are your levers, okay, your control levers. Now this is, again, I'm going to bring spectrum in. You want a radio that's going to provide you really with two self-centering levers. I know a lot of people are getting around with radios without this one self-centering, and that's fine. You can use that, swap that out and have that as your, say, your elevation control if you want. But I would strongly suggest that you get levers that self-center. Okay, on your 9X, it's quite simple to get kits to swap out the levers. On radios like, say, a lot of these new radios coming out, your Tyrannus and probably a lot more, they'll have an option inside where you can make both levers self-centering. So that's something I think really important. After cost, your number of channels that your radio can operate on, you've got to look at your gimbals, your levers here. So you go back to channels. This day and age, I don't think that 6-channel radios, the difference in cost between, say, a 6-channel radio and an 8-channel radio is negligible. You're probably much better off spending that extra money and getting as many channels as you can. So try and get as many channels as you can, and also look for a radio that's easy to get both levers self-centering. You may not think it's important, and certainly you can operate it, but a number of times early on in my tank career, I've had this unit and someone's bumped that and the tank's driven off the table. Okay, if you bump that on a radio with self-centering, your tank's not going to go anywhere, but someone just slightly bumps that, off your tank goes. So, self-centering levers. Probably I'd say the next thing you really need to look at, and it's something very important for tanks, probably a lot more so than for aircraft, are your switches, the number of switches that are available to you. As you go up and use some of the better aftermarket control boards, a lot of their functions will require you to activate them on switches. I know some of the cheaper aftermarket boards, you have funky stick movements that you have to do to get things to operate. So you've got to remember all that, like that up there to do that, and that up there to do that, and this like that with your finger up your bum. But that's kind of a cheap way to do things. It's much better off to have things operating by switches. Okay, so you want a radio with a lot of switches so you can activate anything that people in the future may throw at you, and it also makes it so much easier. Okay, you know that's your ignition switch, that may be fire your gun, that turns on your headlights and so forth. Also, it's a good idea to have at least one potentiometer. So a lot of boards now, you can control your tank volume with your potentiometer. And on, say here, like the Tyrannus or on the 9X, you can swap out that potentiometer for a 6-position, sorry, this is going to be alliteration here, 6-position switch, okay, which is a very handy thing to have. Okay, so again, cost, number of channels, your levers self-centering, and look for a radio with lots and lots of switches. You can't go wrong with switches. Another thing you might want to consider with your radio, depends on what you want to do, is the easy availability of accessories. Like, I like to have stands on all my radios, so you put them down in the dirt, they're not lying in the dirt. So I know with 3D printing you can probably make stands up for any radio you get. A lot simpler to just buy them. So I look for radios with stands, and then if you want to get into, say, FPV, this is one of my main radios. I've got cameras in the tanks, so if you get a radio with a setup that you can easily mount a monitor screen, even better. I mean, you may not be into that, so that may not be important for you. But it's another thing to sort of think about in what direction you might be heading in your RC tank hobby. Okay, so as you can see, I quite like the 9X and the Tyrannus and all that. Simply, well, again, because lots of switches, easy to self-center the gimbals, wide range of accessories, and pretty cheap in cost.